Well, latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. I mean, if you weren't on there for the Pat Riley press conference, you missed a lot. I mean, let's get out of like the same voices that you're hearing on Twitter all the time and go to a place where Heat fans are actually studying things, commenting on 10 different channels around the NBA, a transaction channel, a draft channel. You are missing out. It's $2.99 per month. It's like not even a cup of coffee. So check it out. Off the Floor, link right here in the description. Bypass the Apple upcharge. You can cancel at any time. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down your $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Play across the sports spectrum. Excuse me, NHL, MLS, NBA. When it comes around again, NFL, MLB. It's all there. Check it out. PrizePicks.com. Use the code FIVE for 5. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, five on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to Five on the Floor. Oh my God, we're potting again. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at Five Reasons Sports. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow me at Greg Sylvander. Make sure you check out all the episodes we did prior to Pat Riley's press conference because there's a lot that you may have missed, including Brian Fonseca's pitch over 2 episodes to just punt. Does not appear that that's what's going to happen, Brian. I told you. But it was interesting conversation. And also George Sedano's thought that basically the Heat needed to pick a lane. It also doesn't seem like it's happening. But again, great conversation. And we talked about Davion Mitchell. We talked about John Morant. We talked about everybody pretty much so far. We got more to talk about. But also, of course, the key episode, Alex Brady and I set up in a room right after the press conference ended with our 5 takeaways. I give Alex credit and also my daughter for assisting in this, for the ingenuity in figuring out how to prop up cushions so that we could get the computer up to the right level in this particular lounge. And so hopefully you enjoyed that podcast. Greg was not there. So we're going to do what we've done before, which is bring him in for his thoughts from a completely different state on what he saw. Because sometimes you're in the room and you're just trying to follow questions, take videos, all that other kind of stuff. But what did it sound like from somewhere else? So we got through our 5 takeaways. I know that you commented on some of them on our text string as we were going forward, but you have some additional notes. And then we're going to get into this one comment that Riley made. There's a lot we're going to get into in the next few days, including I'm going to reread The Winner Within for like the 65th time because a reporter brought the book to the press conference, which I give credit for that. I don't think anybody's ever done that since literally Pat's first day on the job, where all the beat guys, this is how old I am, all the beat guys brought it to show that they were reading it. And I can tell you, actually, Pat quoted his own book wrong. So I'm going to go through it. He's got the chapters wrong in terms of when the breakthrough is supposed to happen. He said it was
You're
chapter
getting a
5.
phone call.
It was actually chapter 6. I got it. See, he's got it marked up, paperback, $7.99 from Amazon. So give Pat the royalties and read the book, and we're going to do a separate episode on that. All right, but we're going to get to his other comment today, which I said to Alex and Brady, I could not put this one on a T-shirt. It's not like there are obstacles, but there are none, or even Spolstras, we have enough, or adapt or die, or any of those. This one is change is the highest form of sanity. So we'll get into that comment. But before we do, that's going to be our takeoff point after you get to your general thoughts. So give me your general thoughts.
General thoughts. One, I love the Pat Riley pressers, and I'm not going to lie about it. Even though I think that sometimes you get a ton, sometimes you don't get a lot. And I know that the organization, that if they could have some takebacks, maybe some of those comments they'd like to have back, maybe Riley himself would take certain stuff back. But ultimately, I think it's good for the fan base to hear from him. It's not like a situation where he's running from anybody, and he answered the questions today. And these were the things that jumped out. And we probably could do an episode on each one of these on some level. So just know, to our listeners, that we can circle back to some of these topics, but these are the things that jumped out to me. One was that no opening monologue. And you mentioned this in the other show, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. I thought that was I don't know, it was a switch up, and to me, it showed some level of humility standing up there, that he wasn't going to start to like kind of wind everybody up with a long story about how things were back when, or just kind of, he didn't have to repeat his resumes, just some of the things he's done in his opening monologues he didn't do. So
He did
that's
repeat his
interesting
resume, Greg. He did, but not in the opening monologue. There was a lot of repeating the resume, but yes, no opening
that's true.
monologue.
Later on, you're right. He still got to it.
Right, but the opening monologue, there has always been one that I remember, and I'll let you continue here. But this was very meat and potatoes. He sat down, and we didn't expect that. I would tell you in the room, because the fact that they're putting this on their own YouTube channel now, and the monetization and everything else that comes with that, like we were expecting less, I think. And we were also expecting, and I gave the Keith credit for this on the last podcast, we were also expecting, some of the in-house folks who I have great respect for, and they have a job to do, but to be asking about how great the fans were and all that kind of stuff. And there was honestly none of the fluff in this press conference. They allowed us to ask questions, and he answered the questions. And again, he didn't have a monologue or anything like that. So anyway, continue. But I just want to be clear. There was a lot of resume as it went on and forward. Like
there was. I apologize.
He's reshaped the things. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah, no, I guess to your point about kind of the meat and potatoes of this, and we're going to talk, bigger picture as we go here too. He didn't try to sell anybody on this team being a contender right now. He didn't necessarily lean into the idea of them being a contender immediately like that. He talked about maybe not being so patient, and ownership not wanting this to be a long process, but he definitely adjusted expectations, I thought, in the way that he started, and the fact that he didn't start with an opening monologue. The other one is that I've immediately saw quotes from the aggregator websites and stuff like that, and people commenting that that kind of Pat didn't take responsibility for the Jimmy situation. He did say that the Bucks stopped with him. I know that like everybody wants him to say something different to that. I thought that he was pretty clear, and it was interesting that he didn't say like that they were arguing about different stuff. He just said, I told him no, which was just about the contract. And that's what we knew that this was all about. And I know the one thing I wish would have got snuck in there was, if you knew that the answer was no, why didn't you do something sooner? But so that jumped out at me, and I'm going to run through the rest of these pretty quickly. He explicitly mentioned getting out of the luxury tax for a year to reset the repeater tax rules, and not wanting to be in that too long. Take note of that. I think that that's going to be important going forward. The other one was, and we're probably going to have to do an episode on how this maybe doesn't impact things at some point. I thought him talking about Spoelstra's personal stuff, and you mentioned on the other episode, so I'll only weigh in here quickly. When he's done that in the past, it hasn't always been the best. And so I'm just interested to see how Spo absorbs that and how that's done. I thought like when they also asked a question to him about how the offense had been ranked so low, instead of talking about personnel and what his role in a good offense is, he deferred to saying the coaching, this and that. And so I thought that was like an interesting deflection towards Eric Spoelstra. And then the other thing is that the word rebuild or like retool, even though he didn't want to talk about it, and like tanking kind of that part of it, just the overall conversation of the idea of having to have a lean season or a retool that includes multiple years, which there's always a rev up process. So you may not have the highest, best seed or any seed in next year. I just thought that the fact that he even acknowledged that and then go pie in the sky with we're trying to win a championship here, next year.
Right.
That jumped out at me. So that's my notes. And lastly, with the ribbit stuff, he also said they're not going to run it back. They're not going to do anything drastic. And I think by that he meant Bam and maybe Tyler, although my stance there could change at some point about what they do there if the extension number comes in too high. And Tyler said the price is going to go up. I actually may dispute that. We'll talk about that another day. But just to clarify, everyone, he did say that they do not plan to run it back. And that's my notes for now.
Well, that's a loaded word, right? And how it got into the Liberty commercial and ribbit and all the rest of that stuff. I don't know. I mean, Pat has actually dropped some good nuggets at press conferences before. I started watching what was the show? Unfortunately, he's been discredited since House of Cards. I started watching that because Pat talked about how he was watching. He always drops something in his press conferences. There was no Springsteen references in this. Like I said, there was very little fluff other than that whole ribbit thing. They don't like the view of run it back. They don't. That's not. They're not. They will challenge you on that and say that really only Duncan, Bam, and Tyler have been here for any length of time at this stage. I guess you could throw in now Haywood. So they'll say that it's not really running it back and all the rest of this. And I know the fans will go crazy about that. But the idea of a 2-year build, which is kind of what he talked about, he even said, we've talked about this before, that when they got Shaq, it wasn't right away. It was after that. So he went through his history. I don't know where he's getting the number of 13, like whatever it is, retools from. I mean,
that has to be in his whole career. That's not with the Heat. He hasn't had to do that.
It can't even be in his whole career, though. I mean, with the Knicks, how many retools were there? He added Starks, he added Mason, basically, off the street, and they
Mark
built
Jackson,
around
Derek
Patrick.
Harper move.
I mean, too, the Lakers, there was no rebuild really required there. I mean, he inherited Worthy right. I mean, he did inherit Worthy, right? Or am I missing it? Was that Westhead? I can't remember all of it.
Now you're too far back for even me.
Well, he inherited. Well, yeah, he made that whole comment about who was born before, when he came in, and
that was funny.
Yeah, because Brady and Alex. Brady and Alex 30. But yeah, I mean, I covered his first season in Miami, and I was 23, I guess. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff about age today. There was sort of this sort of awkward question, which he took pretty well, about Pop's health and succession plan. Yeah, there were some heavy moments in there today, actually. And you mentioned the Spo thing. But before we get to this thing, the 13 again, I don't know exactly what he's talking about. I know that there has been, and he'd have to list it. He said it would take 30 minutes or more just on that alone. So perhaps we'll get a rundown of that. I'd love to hear it. He has clearly retooled this thing many times. Right. We'll take it. There's no way to do it. But we've chronicled how they've done their builds and how they've had very shallow valleys and they haven't lasted very long and all the rest of that. Like I get all that. He also admitted they tanked. I've never heard him say that before. And by the way, the league probably shouldn't hear that. And he tried to take it back right away. But he said basically he's tanked twice, right? Or he didn't use the word tanked, but he did word to use tanked. And
you hit on one thing, and that is one of them. They didn't start out the season wanting to tank. I think like
07, 08, they did not.
When he says that, like one of them was a circumstantial moment where they said, listen, we have no other options but to punt on this season. And I guess the other one is Karan's rookie year. They probably
02, 03. Right. But I've also reported, I wrote a column for the Sun Sentinel on the last day of the season saying that they should lose in Toronto that night so they could drop down to 4 instead of 5 and have a better chance to take Bosch. And because nobody was projecting Wade in the top 4 at that point. And he's projected to go 9th, basically, to Chicago. And I got a call right away from folks with the Heat saying, we don't do that, so stop writing that stupid shit, basically. I remember the call specifically and exactly where I was. So they were saying they were not doing it at the time. Maybe they were. But anyway, all of that, it is how it goes. But all of that, okay, The one thing I come out of the press conference, and I know the fans are focusing on, and we'll get to this quote about change and whether or not there's going to be real change. And look, I tried to get in with 3 or 4 different types of questions, and to the credit of the other reporters there, they asked them before I could get in. Okay, like about the new CBAs and how you adjust to that. Do you need to change your direction and Tyler's extension? There was a whole bunch of stuff, but basically, I had like 5 things, and by the time they got to me, I got to my 5th, which was what I said I was going to ask if these others were exhausted, which was, would you manage an aging star again? And I didn't even mention Zoe or Timmy or Gary Payton or Ray Allen, guys who came to them, Hall of Famers who came to them past their prime. But I did mention Shaq, Jimmy, and Dwayne, and he basically said yes. He basically said yes. Okay. And everybody has taken it as yes, because there's one aging star they would manage, and it's Kevin Durant. And we know that. And we're going to do separate episodes about that. And I want to get to this on the other side of it. But the Spo thing to me is the thing I come out of the press conference a little queasy about. Knowing how
Agree.
private, right? Knowing how
Yeah.
private
I
the
mean,
culture
saying the
is.
personal stuff
Yeah.
over the course of the last couple of years. And we are, just to be clear, and you mentioned it on the other pod, and please check that out, because Brady, Alex, and Ethan did a great show right from the arena. And it was like, reaction directly after, which is priceless. But you mentioned like Spoelstra's a very private person. He has not made any kind of excuses, but he didn't have a
No.
great season. He just, for him to acknowledge that in any way, I thought was an interesting move. Even, and you mentioned this is a little bit more lighthearted, like him going to Hawaii. Spoelstra probably doesn't want anyone knowing where he
No.
is on the planet. So he
No.
can really enjoy himself, and he probably will still enjoy himself. So we're probably taking that a little too seriously. But the other part of it is just something where, when you look at when he mentioned something in the arena of LeBron, there's been probably some stuff about Dwayne that I don't 100% remember and can't quote right now. But then the Jimmy
There was
Butler
some stuff.
flare ups. It's just, there's a lot of stuff.
There's some stuff he's revealed about Dwayne that I know didn't go over great. Also, the LeBron thing I know did not go over great. I
for
said this
sure.
in the last pod, 2014, when he revealed Savannah was pregnant, and there were 2 people in LeBron's camp who I got texts from immediately. Why the F is he talking about that? So I just, again, I'm not, Spo may not care. Okay. I don't want to speak for him. I can't speak for him. I just saying,
We're not trying to
I
start
heard
any
that,
shit.
we're not, but when I heard it, I was just like, wait a second. Like, we've been keeping all that stuff private, because that's what I believe in. And I've gone through my own personal issues that got misinterpreted, and I'll just say that. So I have a deeper respect for when people are going through that kind of stuff, particularly because the Heat have been very supportive of me and others as they've been going through it. So it's just, it hit me a little weird, because it's not something Spo would ever say.
Correct.
Ever say. Not an excuse he would ever make. And it wasn't framed as an excuse. It was just like, he's more worn down than I've ever seen him. And we've witnessed that, but I've made sure not to attribute it to the personal stuff, the Jimmy
it's the blown
stuff.
leads.
So it's like, we're being more careful about this than the team president. I don't know. I'm not gonna make a big deal of it, but we just did for 4 minutes. It hit me a little weird, and it hit
was
you a
worth
little weird.
4 minutes or whatever this conversation took, and then we move on.
Then we move on. All right. On the other side of this, though, we're going to do separate episodes on KD. But on the other side of this, we're going to talk about one specific quote here, because I don't know necessarily that fans came out of this knowing what side of this Pat is actually on. But let's get to a sponsor.
And now it's time for the X-Ray of the Play of the Day, brought to us by our friends over at Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. Nelson and his team will bring the X-ray equipment and the staffing to you. If you work in a hospital or a medical office, get a consultation today at c-armandstaffing.com or give them a call at 561-891-9620. Their fleet of trucks at your service. Again, it's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services, 561-891-9620. And now, the X-Ray of the Play of the Day.
You're muted.
We're going to make it the quote of the day. You sent this one to me. It hit me a little bit. when he said it, but now that I'm reading it again, it feels a little like the obstacle. There, there are obstacles, but there are none from back in 2018. Uh, Change is the highest form of sanity, which I guess is the opposite of saying insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? Like I guess this is the inverse of that, the
I
same theme.
guess.
Okay, so change is the highest form of sanity, but he kind of said they were going to make changes, but kind of said they weren't. Like he said he's okay. He spoke about the culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he took shots at sort of the outside podcasters, the former players, everything else, who's saying that his way doesn't work anymore and all that. And he said something I've said, which is that they don't really know how things operate inside anymore. The organization is not exactly as it was when Pat was running it with an iron fist. We don't sit outside practices for 8 hours anymore while Rex Walters is on the board showing Tim Hardaway on the video how he should play point guard because Pat wants that enforced. Okay, like that stuff does not happen anymore. There's been a lot that's been relaxed over the years. Even KG spoke to it. And KG is one of those who would have fit in Heat culture. Okay, I think they have a lot of respect for and has spoken very highly of the Heat. But he talked about that they wear different socks than everybody else, and the Pat way doesn't work anymore. And the reality is, they're not really doing the Pat way the way they used to do the Pat way. Okay, and he was kind of making that point as he made the point as we've made that they're more collaborative than they used to be, and all the rest of this. Spo has, I don't want to use the word relaxed that stuff, but it's more human, okay, than I think it was under Riley's sort of iron fist heyday. Okay, and Pat's more human. Pat's more sentimental than he used to be, I believe. Okay, everybody says that inside the organization. Pat's the one. There's so many things that Pat has refused to fire people inside the building. I can tell you that. Like
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't do it. Like they don't. They are very. And I can speak to this myself because of the way they've dealt with me over the years. And this does not affect the way that I cover them. But again, even today, they set up my daughter in a separate room, and it's just that they're a very human organization in this sort of ways. And Pat is with the employees. The Arisons are with the employees. I know this, okay, from speaking to employees who've been there for a very long time. But they're not run exactly the same way as they used to be.
No way.
And so Pat was kind of coming back at that, but he was also saying, we're not changing this shit. And he basically went through like the best, the hardest working, most, best condition, blah, 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 blah. And he said what we said. I literally said this at the end of these podcasts. They haven't been any of those things this year.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged that. He says, we haven't been like 4 of those things. So it's like what he's saying is the blueprint is not going to change, at least not from what it's been lately. It has evolved, but not from what it's going to be lately. But we're going to do it better to that degree. But I think that the problem the fans are going to have with this and the reaction is that what they really want to change is the personnel. They really want to change the personnel. And I think now what's happened is that the two have been conflated, where a lot of these former players are saying, well, they can't get better personnel. They can't get the star because they don't want to do the Pat thing anymore. So they're being tied together here. So by Pat saying we're not really going to relax our standard, like when he said in 2019, I let the culture slip, right? Then they traded for Jimmy, got rid of Hassan, and that was a culture riser for a while, okay, until it wasn't, right? So I think the way the fans are going to receive this is there wasn't enough talk of change to the personnel in this press conference. It was, we hope Tyler's going to be with us for the rest of his career, right? There's no moving off of Bam. That's clear in the way that he's talking.
He did
There
say
wasn't
they
a lot
can't
of.
rely on internal development. I mean, like he
He
said,
did.
we
He
can't.
did say that.
Like, so that was one. And I just think that, like he did say, we're not going to run it back. We're going to look at changes. You can't keep, the same roster. If you're not winning, you have to look to change. The quote that you mentioned about it being the highest form of sanity. I immediately went to Google to see, like, did he pull that from somebody? And it doesn't appear to be a quote. Maybe he was trying to say that change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Something like that. I don't know. That's one that's, as I'm scrolling here, I'm reading it. I don't make much of the quote other than to say that.
Hold on. I'm looking. While you're going, I'm going to look. I'm going to see if I find it in here. Let's see. Go
Right.
ahead. I mean, you don't make much of the quote, but what?
But I do think that this does set up for them for the Heat fan that just basically wants to see the group get shuffled. I think that there's some of that it is inevitably coming. I think that he made that clear when he talked about like the big changes and if they needed those. And some people really took that and ran with it. I think what he means there is Bam and Tyler, although the Tyler extension, is going to make that an interesting conversation move forward. But to me, like the lateral move, the fact that he brought up the Jay Crowder, Andre Iguodala move, like that, he knows he needs, he also very politely, kindly, and with a lot of mindfulness dodged calling Bam and Tyler like 1A and 1B being like the pillars of the build. So I think he kind of left the door open for somebody to take that kind of position. So to me, I think that he said enough about change. He's not going to come out and say, yeah, we're trading everyone for picks. Like, so I think that kind of what social media wants him to say, he has to be a little more articulate and he has to position it in the right way as a professional. And so that's just where you're never going to please the fan base that way.
No, did you notice? I don't think he said a single other player's name today.
No, he
Brady
didn't address
knows
like
this.
retaining Davion. If that was no one
He
said,
wasn't
is it a
asked.
priority to keep your restricted free agent? That's a normal question to him in an exit
Right.
interview. They didn't even get to that. So it really was meat and potatoes. Like Wiggins didn't get talked about a ton. I thought that they may weave him in as a piece that like they're wanting to integrate and see more of. They didn't even breach
the only thing that was even broached about Wiggins, Davion Mitchell, and Kyle Anderson was with him talking about we really were only dealing with one team and then we had to deal with another. So it was like, okay, we got what we could get. That's what it felt like. And again, nobody asked. And I give, and I know they're not going to get any credit for this. I give the reporters credit for this today. Like there was no bullshit. Okay. It was what had to be. Look, he's going to give better answers, okay, if you open questions to him than if you make declarative statements at him. It's just not, people don't understand how this works or how he works. So the questions were asked in a way I thought very well by Ira, by Tim, by Anthony, okay, by others. Barry wasn't there today, okay, but they were asked in a way by Will and by Brendan, okay, people who were around a lot, okay. They were asked in a way. And Hyde. Well, Hyde, it was funny because Hyde's hardly been there the whole year. Hyde's basically almost all Dolphins these days, or there's a little bit of Panthers. And the funny thing with Hyde was that Tim was starting to ask a question, sort of the career mortality question that I've asked before, by the way. Okay, at least two press conferences. I've stopped, but I guess Riley associates that one with Hyde.
Yeah.
So like he joked about it was Hyde's question, and then when it got to Hyde didn't even get to ask. David didn't even get to ask the question. Of course, David, a longtime columnist of the Sun Sentinel, like Riley just started answering it, and then Pat's like, "Okay, what do you got?" Dave's like, "Well, you just basically said it," which was about his own career mortality. But this was all. Like I said, there was no like fluff about, it was bigger picture questions. Like I wanted to ask him about the direction of the organization with the new CBA and how you adjust to that. He said a lot of things that we've talked about the way the organization operates now. He talked about the Arisons kind of giving him the go ahead. You do your thing. Okay. That's how it's been. We know that Nick has final say, has had since 2011, but Pat helps still craft the vision. Okay. And obviously has a say in these decisions as they go forward. And I just thought the overall tone of it was like, again, we're not going to deal with the petty stuff. Like, and it's crazy that a guy like Andrew Wiggins, who makes $30 million a year and is going to make that for the next 2 seasons, is considered like the petty stuff, like the small stuff. But in the course of where they are as an organization, he is, and Duncan is, and Haywood is. Haywood wasn't asked about. Davion wasn't asked about.
It's like a mistake. It's like not even worth mentioning
Terry,
anymore.
Well, and there were fans who wanted us to grill him on Terry. Okay, here's the deal. Spo and Pat wanted Terry. Okay, so what do you want us to do? Okay, we wanted Terry. So what do you want us to do? Pat, you got this guy who was basically a looter and a riot in Charlotte. Okay, you gave up a first-round pick in Lowry's expiring contract. What kind of position would you be in right now if you hadn't done that? What's the point of that? Like, how does that direct them forward? They know what they have to do with Terry Rozier now, and whether or not they're going to be able to do it. They showed you by playing Davion Mitchell ahead of him, okay, in 37 minutes, and finally Spo, gave up that ghost, okay, and stopped playing Terry. But like even before he got hurt in the playoffs. But like, I don't understand the point of that. Like the point is to see where they're going. And what I want to ask was, are you going to consider another aging star? He is. He is. And the reality of that is that's not really changed for Pat. That's not really changed. Like, that's
Gotta be
what
the
he
right
does.
guy.
Right. There's only one guy. I mean,
You're right.
Giannis, yes. Giannis,
Yeah,
yes. But that
because
is
you
a
drop
pie in the
everything for
sky.
Giannis, of course. Yeah.
Right. But KD, like, you're making a conscious decision, okay, that you're going in to compete with this team right now because you're not bringing KD in to just have a retirement tour. You're
No.
bringing in KD because you want to do what he said they couldn't do this year, finish their fourth quarters. He kept talking about that. Okay. And also, he kept talking about alphas and all this sort of stuff. Alex was going to cringe because he hates when I do this, but like he was talking about, characterizing
Tyler
how
seeing
Bam
2
and
on the
Tyler,
ball and how that
two on the
he's having to
ball.
adjust on that. Yeah.
He's literally talking about Kevin Durant. Like this, the whole idea is like you bring in Kevin Durant to solve this problem for you. Now, at what price, right? So we've talked about what they were willing to offer. Jimmy's contract, which basically they wanted to get rid of anyway because they couldn't keep him anymore. Jovic, who they like but is extension eligible, hasn't been able to stay healthy, and a first round pick. Phoenix wasn't interested in that. Phoenix asked for everything. I don't think Phoenix will ask for everything this time, but they just put someone else in place in the front office. Okay. James Jones is not, he has a role, but it's not the same role. So that connection with the Heat front office is not going to be quite the same. And Ishbia is still like big game hunting, I think. So like maybe he wants to cut some salary. Could the Heat make a very, and we'll do more on KD. I want to bring people on to talk about what KD's game really is right now because I don't think people understand. He is elite still, like elite. Like you look at his offensive numbers, they are where they were his entire career. He doesn't finish as well as he did before or as much. He's not around the rim as much. He's not as good a defender. But man, he is still like at what he does, like he is still great. The question is, we've talked about this. Are they close enough to anything of significance that there's any point to it at this stage? Okay. And what do you have to give up to get him? Are you going to give up Khalil Ware, or can you make this work with Wiggins and Duncan's contract, which will help Ishbia save a little bit of money and all the other things that are involved there? And do you give up 2 picks, or do you give up 3 picks, or you even have 3 picks to give up? Do you have the swap? Like these are all conversations we could have, but it's clear where he's going, and that is not change. That is what Pat has typically done over the course of his career. It's not change when you're going to go after the same guy that you went after in 2016, 2022, and just recently in early 2025. That is not change. I'm not saying I disagree with. I would love to have Kevin Durant here. Give us something to podcast about. Okay.
Yep.
What did KD say? All he wanted when he got into this was play ball and get girls, basically. That's it. Like KD doesn't want to lead. He wants to ball.
Yeah.
He can still ball. Okay. And that's where they're at. But I think there are some Heat fans who are going to react to this and say he wants to run it back. I think that what you and I came out of with this was they're going to make a run at KD without trying to give up too much. And if they can't get him, they'll change the group around Bam and Tyler, basically. Delay Tyler's extension at this point. Tell him to prove it again. Okay. Right? Isn't that what you took from it? That's not a ton of
100%.
change, but right.
Yeah. And it's also, I want to emphasize it again. Them saying that him saying, but this is more collectively the benefits of ducking under the tax just for one season. Like if you think about what it takes to do that, they would need to shed Duncan Robinson somehow. And then the Davion Mitchell deal, like you have to make sure that you can still stay under the luxury tax and retain him. And I think that would be an important thing to do. So you just would have maneuvering to do. But first, it's going to be about checking in on KD. They want to try a star player of his caliber, but they want it at their price. They have not been willing yet. And sometimes it's because they don't have enough assets, but also they can't give up their like such a large percent of their total assets where other teams have more to stack onto. So there's just a lot of question marks there for how they get a deal done. But it felt like it signaled Durant. It felt like it signaled that if that kind of thing doesn't happen, to your point, they are preparing the fans. And he mentioned the word rebuild and retool and talked about being in these situations before. All of that is acknowledging the reality of where this team is. It may take a lean year. And I think that this is why, Ethan, when people talked about why the hell do they not want their 2025 pick, the 9th pick in this draft would be great. But an unprotected pick next year, in the event that they don't get a player like Durant and it is a lean season, would have been just unfathomable to go through. So like there are the benefits of that and understanding why the protections are still in place.
And that would have been a good question to ask. Why were you guys so afraid of losing the unprotected picks? Right, but we didn't get to it. But that is kind of the natural place. And I know some people proposed that question when we put it out there the day before. Like, okay, if you think you're going to be good, like, why were you so concerned? We understood the reason for it, but to have him actually say it might have been a compelling thing to listen to. I just think, again, we're going to do episode. I want to do an episode about Durant and kind of where he is with his game. We'll bring on somebody from Phoenix. I'd love to bring on Gambo, actually. I'll reach out because I think that would be a good get here for those who followed his work with the Suns. There are reporters I trust around the country who do a good job with this. I'm also going to bring on Howard Beck to talk about Giannis. Going to bring on Vinny Goodwill to talk about the league climate. So we're gonna do a whole bunch of this stuff. But I think the one thing that also concerned fans, and we'll close it here, is when Pat talked about how weird the league is and got into like Indiana and New York and teams coming back late and all these road teams winning. And I think that is when I checked out social media, that's where fans were like, oh God. Like, does he think they're close? Like, just because some of this other stuff happened, including the fact that he said that they were not the team that they were in those last two games. And I hate
didn't
to
like
say
that.
it.
I just
Right.
let me go on record. I did like
Right.
so vehemently denied that they are that type of team. This version, let it be that type of team, and let's make
Right.
changes, and then maybe they won't be that type of team.
They were that type of team by the end. Right. I mean, that they were. I mean, look, Cleveland has proven, and I know they've had injuries, and as we speak tonight, probably we won't know by the time this posts, whether they're down 2-1 or 3-0 to Indiana. But we did a whole episode on Indiana and how the Heat lost pace with the Pacers. And with Cleveland, like, they did not look like they belonged on the same court, with the exception of game 2, where they got within 2 points. I just don't think, unless he knows about some stuff that was happening behind the scenes that was really ugly that got in their way, I don't think you could watch that product over the last 2 games and think they were anywhere close, no matter what the rest of the league has looked like otherwise, or the fact that Boston and Cleveland. In fact, this whole thing about, he also brought up this other thing, which I think would concern people, where he talked about how rest didn't matter, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. And there's a couple different ways I take that. One is that rest didn't matter in terms of getting the extra week off and all that. The Boston and Cleveland, they got their rest, and look what happened in the early series. But also, like, there's this other thing that's going around, and I saw Frank Isola, who's been a Tibbs guy forever, even before he got the Knicks job. And Isola's been putting it out there, like, looking at how Tibbs has all the minutes, right? Like, I think five of the top 8 minutes getters in the league are on the Knicks, okay, this season. And Cleveland totally, like, they didn't play anybody any minutes. Like, I think Donovan Mitchell and Mobley led them at like 31 minutes this year. And Isola's point is, well, see, maybe Tibbs like running them into the ground. He really wasn't running into the ground. He was getting them ready for the playoffs. So there was when he talked about like not needing rest, I'm like, oh my God. Well, Tyler, get ready to play 45. And and all that. So I think there were some things that and he also said, the other one he said, this is why I'm saying there was a lot of resume stuff in here. He also said that he mentioned his playbook. I could bring out my playbook from whatever it was,
But it
2005,
would be
2006,
archaic or
2000.
something.
It would be
Yeah.
archaic. But then he stopped himself and basically said that it would still work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Some of that
Okay.
is just like head coach pride. And
Yeah.
also like in the course of a press conference like that, and Brady mentioned it briefly, and I know we're closing up shop here. He did speak out of both sides of his mouth, and that in certain moments he said like that he thought that they had pieces and that they could do certain things, and that they weren't that team that lost those games. But then in other moments he's talking about all the other rebuilds. That's kind of alluding to what they're having to be up against now. So I think just in the course of these Riley pressers, inevitably he's probably going to contradict himself just by virtue of him just kind of he is really arrived at a place where he kind of free flows these things. I don't think he plans very much. I don't get the sense that that's the case at all. But anyway, another Riley presser in the books.
Another one in the books. I'm just going to read a couple of things, but we're going to do more of this later. I'll close with this. He said that they were at the Thunderbolt stage of Winter Within. So that's chapter 4. And I'll just say this. I don't see it. By the way, he said that next comes the breakthrough, but actually his next chapter was the choke.
Are
I don't
we
know.
in the
I don't know what
Thunderbolt stage because we owe our pick to the Thunder now?
I
Right.
guess, but I mean, I'll just read this and we'll take this out the door, okay? Ryle's guide to bolt proofing. This is from chapter 4. Stick to your key strengths and core values. They will be your emergency generator when a bolt strikes. Ground the bolt's shock value by involving your core team. Exploit the equivalent benefit in any adversity and milk it for as much personal development as you can get. And for God's sakes, get the weather report before you go to the door. Meaning, stay attuned to any regulatory hearings, competitive innovations, new twists in behavior or attitude of key teammates, or slippage in standards and procedures that give the inkling that Thunderbolt may be unleashed. I mean, I'm gonna review it. I don't know, man. I don't think this is. There's another chapter in there, the innocent climb. I remember when Dwayne was drafted and he spoke about the innocent beginning. I remember the column I wrote the night Dwayne was drafted, and Pat spoke about that. This doesn't feel like an innocent climb or an innocent beginning. This feels like a crossroads. You know, like, and I think Sedano said best, just pick a lane, and it feels like right now, okay, it's KD, or like you said, maybe take a step back, reset a little bit financially, and go that direction and kind of see what you can do around Bam and Tyler. But I don't think he's committed to like Bam and Tyler as his 1 and 2. That's obvious long term, but I don't know that Heat fans are going to get quite the change that they're looking for based on this press conference. Anyway, Greg, we've gone too long. Check out the sponsors, c-armandstaffing.com. Reach out to Nelson, great guy, and they do great business there. If you work in a medical office, and also Prize Picks, use the code FIVE. We'll do KD episode over the weekend. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.